Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's C-O-M-B-E-S-T, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?
Yes, it's me, Egbert. As the new owner of this station, I want to make sure we have the best talent on the air. That's why I've decided to ban all real estate agents and only have real talkers like Brad and John. Here they are, B and J.
I'm going to talk to, I told you I was going to talk to Egbert about that. I don't think that's right. I think he's being uninclusive. I think in today's society you have to be super inclusive, don't you think?
And the credo of Egbert 104.5 is nothing if not DEI, Brad. Excuse me, DIE. DIE.
What's
That's what we should call it.
What's DIE? Die?
Yeah, it's die. It's never DEI. You think about what they want to happen to people like you and I, Brad, and it's DIE. It's not DEI.
Yeah, it could be. That is John Combest. He's the guy that every single day for 22 plus years puts together a list of all the top stories around the state, all the political kind of things. He scours newspapers, websites, TV stations, radio stations, even the government sites as well. And he puts it all together, and he puts it together for us, and we can go there at johncombest.com, C-O-M-B-E-S-T, combest.com, just like it sounds. And every morning we defer to him and say, John, give us the top 3 stories that are on johncombest.com this morning.
Number 3, in the number 3 bucket, we're going to put stuff from Jeff City. And that might seem a little bit broad, but it's not. More specifically, yesterday on Pete Mundo's show, Pete hosts a show at KCMO Radio, he had both sides of the warring factions. If you think about the Freedom Caucus of Republicans in Jeff City, and then you think about the group that's not a member of the Freedom Caucus, both sides were on Pete Mundo's show yesterday. If folks listen to one interview of that set, I would recommend they listen to the interview that Pete did with Mike Searpoy. Mike Searpoy is a Republican state senator from Lee's Summit, and he gave essentially a rebuttal to everything that Bill Eigel has been saying over the last few weeks. Now, we on this show have given a whole lot of you could call it mind share or time to Bill Eigel and the ideas that Bill Eigel and the Freedom Caucus are putting forward. So I think we should highlight what Mike Searpoy said. In general, I think Mike's summary was that Eigel and company, but specifically Eigel, have been, in his words, very selfish. He described Bill as being out of his mind. And part of Searpoy's point is that a lot of the stuff that the Freedom Caucus is talking about could have been done in previous years. So Searpoy points out that initiative petition legislation passed the Missouri Senate last year, and it didn't come back from the House. But he gives a really strong rebuttal to a lot of the points that Eigel has been making. So I would recommend that people check that out. And yesterday morning, Pete had Bill Eigel on at the 7 o'clock hour. So the other thing is Searpoy was able to respond directly to a lot of the things that Eigel said at the 7 o'clock hour. The number 2 story, and I would also put in that Jeff City bucket, Brad, that Governor Parson held his annual State of the State. It was, of course, his final State of the State, where he gave an overview of what his proposed budget will be. And he kind of, I think the Post-Dispatch were the ones that described the speech as a victory lap, and I think that would be appropriate. Yeah, that was, the Post-Dispatch headline says Parson takes victory lap, to talk a little bit about the successes that he had, I-70, pro-life legislation and such. The number 2 story is that Democrats may have found someone to take their loss in 2024 against Ann Wagner. Ann Wagner will be reelected this fall in the 2nd Congressional District. And a gentleman named John Keane is volunteering to take Democrats' loss. If the name John Keane sounds familiar for folks who are hardcore political people, or people who just drive around looking at yard signs, John Keane ran for the state legislature in 2018 and lost. He ran in 2022 and lost. Oh, and in the middle of that, he ran in 2020 and lost. So he's looking to take his 4th loss in a row. I assume other Democrats will file to fill that Democrat ballot slot. And Ann Wagner won re-election last time by 11 points. She faced a really qualified Democrat named Trish Gunby, who had been a state representative previously. So John Keane is volunteering to take the loss. He'll probably face a spirited primary among Democrats.
Yeah, but can I be devil's advocate with you, John?
Sure.
You sound very assured that Ann's going to win. How do you know that? Things are weird. I mean, and her district got changed around a little bit. She doesn't have the same component of her district that she did have in the past. Some people say she's got a more Republican district. I don't know if that's necessarily the case, because I know she took over part of Franklin County, which she didn't have before. But how do you know that people just may, just saying, we're tired of Ann. Let's just vote for this other guy. You know what I'm saying?
So I do know exactly what you're saying. And to that point, Brad, that victory, or I should say that defeat of Ann Wagner would come in the Republican primary. It wouldn't come in the general election.
Are you sure about that?
I'm absolutely sure about that.
Okay.
There's no chance for a Democrat to win this seat. Now, here's where I was wrong, Brad. I thought that Bob Onder would run against Ann Wagner in the primary.
Yeah.
And I think that race would be super competitive.
Well, now
I think Bob would have. Go ahead.
Because he's in the second. See, I get confused because they redistricted this.
You're right. He is in the second district, right?
Onder's in the second district, but everybody thinks he's going to run for the third district.
A lot of people do. You're right.
And so why would he run in a second district against Ann Wagner? I mean, and like I said, you said he'd probably be defeated tremendously in the primary, correct?
Well, yeah, I think he would have a spirited fight against Ann Wagner. Now, remember, when I thought that this was going to happen, I had no idea that Blaine Luetkemeyer would announce his retirement. So I'm talking about a year ago. I thought, I could see Onder running against Ann in a primary, and he would be running to her right. And but Ann will win assuming no strong Republican files against Ann Wagner in the primary, Ann will win by who knows what the margin would be. And remember, last time she ran in a Republican year that was not strong, Brad. 2022 was not a great year for Republicans, and she beat a really well-qualified Democrat state rep by 11 points.
John,
and a woman who went out there, her opponent Trish Gunby went out there and talked about abortion and women's rights and, the traditional Democrat game plan and got spanked.
John, how can you say that in 2022? We had the red wave in 2022.
We did.
Oh my God, the red.
Insurmountable.
Oh my God, there were 150 seats in the House, the U.S. House, who were turned to Republican, weren't they? Oh, no,
436. So Republicans won every House one, and then we even added another seat.
Boy, the red wave,
just for fun.
The red wave never really happened, did it?
And we gave Missouri another congressional seat back, which is great.
Yes.
Yeah, we exhumed Ike Skelton, actually, and we had his carcass in the U.S. House of Representatives. I'm going to stop before I say something that might possibly offend someone. The number one story, Brad, is a follow-up to a conversation we had earlier in the week. And again, it's our feel-good story. The Columbia Missourian covered a Mark Alford event. And if you still had your applause button handy, you could hit the applause button.
Hold on a minute. Let me see. Let me think. I can't remember which one it is. Is this one? Just hold on a minute.
Sad trauma.
No, that's not it. Hold on. How about this one? Hold on. No, that's spooky stuff. How about?
Yeah, that is spooky.
Oh, that's drum. Hold on a minute. Maybe it's this one. No, that's crickets. Hold on. This one. No, that's the Wayback Machine.
That's a dream sequence, right?
Okay, here. No, that's not it. Hold on a minute. Hey, there it is.
There we go. We got to it. Congressman Mark Alford had an event, a small business roundtable in Columbia, where he essentially allowed small business folks to come in and kvetch about their complaints about the economy and how hard it is to hire people. What was interesting is that Congressman Alford was one of the other guests on our friend Pete Mundo's show in Kansas City. And Mark started the interview by saying, "Hey, I just drove in from Columbia. We had an event there." So it's great. And the Missourian covered it. And not only did they send a reporter, Brad, they also sent a designated photographer.
Wow.
But I know. So above and beyond. So, the Brad and John show, doing our part for civic engagement and better public information and really better journalism, which is what we do.
Now, hold on a minute. I thought that the newspapers had gone the same route of the radio or the TV stations where they don't send a reporter and a photographer. They send one person who reports and takes pictures.
And uses their iPhone. By the way, speaking of photos, there's the Post-Dispatch had a photographer at the state of the state and captured a fantastic picture of Bill Eigel making a super skeptical theatrical face while Governor Parson was speaking, like just, really over the top. You could tell that the governor was probably saying something about the state budget or a reckoning or something.
And the Post-Dispatch will use that picture forever and ever and ever. Because
they have so many great pictures. There's one of Andrew Bailey, the Attorney General, who looks like he's so disappointed and outraged at something, and he's jutting out that lower lip. Anyone who's ever raised a child or seen a 2-year-old knows that face, and the Post-Dispatch uses that for everything. Yeah. Brad, a story that didn't make our top 3, because I don't link to stories that are just about county governments. If I did so, I'd have to link to 114 county news plus the city of St. Louis. St. Louis County, according to St. Louis Public Radio, issued a report about minority hiring. Did you see this, Brad?
No.
And it was incredibly disappointing because it talked about how much St. Louis County is letting down minorities by not essentially filling enough quotas for construction jobs. And here's the outrage, Brad. Did you know that of all the government contracts that went out for St. Louis County construction, there was not a single female brick mason put on a job in St. Louis County?
It's interesting you should bring this up. Once again, I watch a lot of videos, and there is this there's all sorts of crazy stuff, and I've gotten sort of hooked on on the YouTube Shorts, which is which essentially is the competitor to TikTok, where everything is shot vertically and it's
60 seconds.
60 seconds. Okay. I've never actually listened to the podcast, but it's a bunch of guys. It's like 3 or 4 guys who sit around, and they always bring a bunch of women into the studio, and I think it's called Whatever.
It's the Whatever podcast, yeah.
Do you know about this?
I do.
Okay.
I don't watch it, but I know all about their clips.
Okay, so one of the women on there was talking about how important it was, how all the accomplishments of women and things like that, and they didn't really need men. And she's going like, well, we don't really need men. And one of the dude on they sit. If you've seen the video, the dudes sit on the left side of the table. The women,
and the ladies of the night or whoever they are sit on the right.
And the men, the ladies sit on the right side of the table. And he just goes off on a rant, which was incredible because he says, you drive on highways that were built by men. You live in a house that was built by men. You drive around in a car that was built by men. And the interesting thing was, you mentioned that he couldn't find a brick mason because of the fact, and it's interesting because Piers Morgan does the same thing. He said there's all these construction jobs that are available to women, and they don't want them.
I wonder why.
Well, I mean, it's like, I won't mention who it is because I don't want to get him in trouble, but we have someone that I know that runs a contracting company, and he is always actively trying to hire women. He can't find them in his particular trade. There's a few of them out there, and the problem is that he's told me this sort of in confidence, so I won't say who it is, that he gets the women who come in and they do the job for a while, and they're like, I don't know if this is right for me, and then they quit. And it's not, and there's some people go, well, it's because they're being harassed by the men on the job. No, I mean,
of course not.
Now, are there women out there who are skilled tradesmen, carpenters, and things like that? Yeah, but there's very, very, very few of them.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things that that if you go look at, if you go through any of these new subdivisions that have been built, like in St. Charles County, in West St. Louis County, and you look at the crews, the framing crews, almost 99% of the time, all men. The guys who are, pour the foundation, all men. And once again, it's not that they don't hire women, it's that women don't want those jobs. And I'm not trying to be...
You're right, Brad, but you know what the answer to all this is? The county needs to spend more money on, quote, education. Now, this is, you and I are clearly in the wrong industries in our life, because if we put together educational, quote, training materials, and we just pitched them and we went to every large county in the United States and said, you are not hiring enough bricklayers and masons and mechanics. And here's our education program to teach you how to do it better.
Well, one of my insurance agents, her husband was a bricklayer, a brick mason, whatever you want to call it. And she would complain about the fact that he didn't work nearly as much as he used to because of the fact that most people don't build with brick anymore.
Right.
And what's interesting is she pointed out the fact, and once again, I'm a construction nerd because my dad was a civil engineer. A lot of buildings now that are brick, they have prefabricated brick panels that they like. I don't know if you've seen this before.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
But it's done in a factory and they bring it on site and they just boom, pop it into place and away you go. And it's just one of those things. Brick, if you go and it's interesting you should mention that because one of the big this sort of dovetails into something maybe we'll talk about in segment 2, segment 3. In St. Louis County and in St. Charles County and St. Louis County have the I take that back. St. Charles City and St. Louis County have the same issue. You know what that issue is?
What's that?
They want a new building. St. Charles County, and it's funny, I know Dan Borgmeyer. I should ask him if he'd come on the air and talk about this. They have a really cool building in downtown St. Charles. Matter of fact, they sit right across the street from the St. Charles County Courts building. And matter of fact, I don't know what street that is, but on one side of the street, they're both on 2nd Street. And on one side of the street, it's St. Charles City Hall. And on the other side of the street, it's St. Charles County Courts building, okay?
I know where you're talking about. I know that intersection.
Right. And the St. Charles County office building is not that old. I mean, when I say not that old, it's not like it dates back to the 1800s. It's sort of modernistic looking.
Yeah,
okay?
It is.
St. Louis County has a building, once again, which I think was built like in the 60s or 70s or something like that, because the building now that is where the police are and where's the expanded county jail is where the entire St. Louis County used to be. That used to be the entire building. Courts and everything were in that building. And now it's just used for the thing. Anyway, St. Louis County, Dr. Page has said, we need to raise taxes because we need a new building. And see, here's what's interesting. He says their building's too old. We have a federal government, the Senate building, the House and the Rep, and the building they're in. How old is that? What?
Very old. I used to work in one of them.
2 centuries?
Very old.
Isn't it like a century and a half, 2 centuries old, something like that?
I don't know if it's that old. We'll look that up over break.
How old's the White House? I know it was burnt down by the British, in 1812 or something like that, but the White House essentially is like, 200 years old? Something like that?
It is, just looked it up, 232 years old.
The White House, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
So how is it that we can have a building that is our seat of, the most important building in the country as far as where our president sits and lives and the whole bit, that's over 2 centuries old, and St. Louis County can't deal with a building that's like 40 or 50 years old?
Yeah.
I don't get that.
Well, because you know what? Construction trades and unions and other people, they need a little bit of work in this economy. So why not spend taxpayer money to build things?
We'll talk about that beginning next break because I've heard the reason why, and I say bogus reason. Okay.
Well, let's call it out. Let's talk about it.
I say I'll call BJ on that, not BS. I'll call. Oh, that's BJ.
Hey, watch it, Brad. FCC is listening.
All right. Okay.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?